He thought she was just a scared, hungry girl at his doorstep, but when the truth came out the next morning, the entire town shook. Before we begin, smash that subscribe button right now, because the story you're about to hear will make you question everything you think you know about kindness, secrets, and the people we pass on the street without a second look. On a cold, rain-swept evening in a small Georgia town where streetlights buzzed like they were tired of fighting the darkness, Marcus Bennett, a hard-working black father who split his days between construction shifts and guiding his 10-year-old son Caleb through homework and dreams bigger than their tiny rented home, was not expecting his life to twist into something that would grip national headlines. Yet that's exactly what began when a frantic knock hit his door just after 11 p.m., and when he opened it he found a drenched, trembling teenage girl clutching a torn backpack like it was the only thing keeping her alive, her eyes swollen from crying, her voice barely holding together as she whispered, "Please, please, I just need somewhere safe for tonight." And even though Marcus had no idea who she was, even though single parents know better than to bring strangers into their already fragile world, something in her desperation collided with something in his past. The memory of losing his wife to a hit-and-run 3 years earlier, the guilt he carried for not having saved her, the promise he'd made to himself to never turn away someone in need. So he let her in, gave her a blanket, made her hot soup, and asked her name, to which she hesitated and answered, Lena, leaving out the last name that would have changed everything in an instant, because Marcus didn't know that the girl whose hair dripped onto his kitchen tiles was actually the missing daughter of one of the wealthiest men on the East Coast. Billionaire investor Charles Vanderwyck, whose face was on every business channel and whose people were out searching every highway and city block with helicopters, drones, and private security teams after she had vanished without a trace 12 hours earlier. But Marcus only saw a child in fear, a runaway maybe, someone who flinched every time thunder cracked, someone who checked the window repeatedly as if expecting monsters are meant to appear any second. So he did what good fathers do, he offered safety, even if it cost him sleep, even if it meant dealing with consequences he couldn't foresee. And as Lena sat at the table sipping soup with shaking hands, Caleb came out rubbing his eyes and asked who the visitor was, and Marcus simply said, "Someone who needs our help tonight." And Caleb, wise beyond his years, nodded and fetched an extra pillow, unknowingly stepping into a story that would shake both their futures apart. Meanwhile, while the storm raged outside, Lena found herself studying the simple life inside this little home. The pencil drawings taped to the fridge, Caleb's science project drawing on the counter, a framed photo of Marcus's late wife, and the warmth she felt in this humble space was so foreign to her that she almost cried again, because she came from a world of marble floors, armored cars, and penthouse silence where money solved everything except the loneliness that had driven her to escape in the first place. But she said none of that aloud as Marcus finally asked, gently but firmly, "Are you in danger?" And Lena whispered, "Not anymore, I think," though her voice trembled in a way that told him the story ran deeper. He didn't push her, just told her she could sleep on the couch, that Caleb would sleep in his room, and that nothing bad would happen in this house, not while he was alive. As she fell asleep clutching the blanket, Marcus sat awake in a chair, watching the door, unaware that within hours he would be accused of kidnapping, threatened by powerful men, and forced to choose between protecting this girl and protecting his own child. By sunrise the storm had passed, but the real storm, the human one, was only beginning, because as Marcus fried eggs and Caleb packed his school bag, Lena woke up to the sound of a news alert buzzing from Marcus's small kitchen TV where a breaking news headline flashed her own photograph across the screen with the caption, "Missing heiress, $500 million fortune at stake, family fears abduction." The fork dropped from her hand, the color drained from her face, and Marcus turned in disbelief as he recognized the girl on the screen as the same one sitting at his table. Before he could speak, she panicked, backing up so fast she nearly tripped over the couch, pleading, "I didn't mean to lie. I had to get away. Please don't make me go back yet." And Marcus wasn't the kind of man to raise his voice, but he felt a father's instinct to protect his home kicking in, protect Caleb, protect peace, protect everything, as he asked her, "Are you telling me your father is Charles Vanderwyck?" "The Vanderwyck." And she nodded, tears streaming, admitting she ran away because her father was planning to ship her to an elite behavioral academy for wealthy teens, a place she described as rigid, cold, suffocating, run like a military camp for children whose parents were too rich to deal with them. And she begged him not to call anyone, not yet, because she'd only left home after overhearing her father threaten to cut her inheritance, lock down her freedoms, and send bodyguards to follow her permanently after she refused a billionaire-arranged future. But before Marcus could process any of this, a black SUV screeched to a stop outside his house and several men in suits stepped out like a tactical unit, knocking on the door hard enough to shake the frame, shouting, "Mr. Bennett, we know she's inside. Step out with your hands visible." And in an instant Marcus realized how easily this could turn into a nightmare for him. A black father in a quiet town being confronted by armed security forces with assumptions in their heads and power behind their badges, and he quickly told Caleb to stay in the bedroom no matter what happened. Lena froze in terror, whispering, "I didn't know they'd find me so fast," and Marcus, heart racing, knew he had to walk a tightrope, protect her dignity, protect his son, and keep himself alive. He opened the door slowly, hands raised, calmly telling the men that the girl came to his door on her own and that he had done nothing wrong, but the men brushed past him, searching the house without permission, shouting orders, grabbing Lena by the arm as she cried out, and Marcus stepped forward with a boldness he didn't know he possessed, telling them to stop, to lower their voices, to treat her like a human being, and the situation nearly exploded when one guard shoved Marcus and accused him of kidnapping, but just then a second SUV pulled up, this one with Charles Vanderwyk himself stepping out, a tall, intimidating man with the kind of presence that makes other powerful people go quiet. He rushed into the house, gathered Lena in his arms, but instead of relief in his face there was anger, blistering anger, and he rounded on Marcus shouting, "How dare you hide my daughter? Do you have any idea who I am?" But before Marcus could answer, Lena broke free and screamed, "He saved me. You would have let your men drag me like a criminal. Marcus treated me like a person." And that moment froze the entire room. Charles looked from his daughter to Marcus and something in his expression shifted, not softened exactly, but recalibrated. Realizing maybe he judged too fast, but the damage was already done, and Marcus, humiliated, furious, and shaken, simply told Charles to take his daughter and leave, wanting this nightmare out of his home. They left with Lena looking back through the SUV window with guilt heavy in her eyes, knowing she might never see Marcus or Caleb again. But her story was far from over, because later that night, Charles discovered a note in her pocket that she had written in Marcus's kitchen, a note saying, "He was the first adult who listened. The first who didn't see me as a problem. You should learn from him." And that note changed everything. 3 days passed, and Marcus tried to return to normal, work, chores, helping Caleb practice for his school's robotics competition. But reporters camped outside his street, neighbors whispered, and he lost a construction contract because the company didn't want drama, leaving him struggling to pay rent again. But he refused to blame Lena, believing kindness always had a cost, and he'd pay it again if he had to. Then, one afternoon, a limousine pulled up and out stepped Charles Vanderwyk, not with bodyguards, not with threats, but alone, carrying an envelope and wearing an expression that suggested he had practiced humility in the mirror before arriving. Marcus didn't want to talk, didn't want more trouble, but Charles lifted a hand and said, "Please. Hear me out as a father, not a billionaire," and Marcus reluctantly agreed. Charles explained that Lena had told him everything, about the soup, the blanket, the safety, the warmth of a home that felt more like family than their mansion, and that she insisted he come in person to apologize. Charles then handed Marcus the envelope, which Marcus assumed was money and tried to hand back immediately, saying, "I don't want your payoff," but Charles stopped him, saying, "It's not money. Open it," and inside Marcus found papers naming Caleb as a full scholarship recipient to the top STEM academy in the state, something Marcus had only dreamed of but never been able to afford, and next to it was a letter offering Marcus a position as site supervisor for Vanderwyk Developments, triple his current pay, set hours, full benefits. Marcus was stunned into silence, but Charles said, "You showed my daughter what humanity looks like. Let me show you what gratitude looks like," and before Marcus could respond, Lena stepped out of the limo, smiling shyly, holding a small gift for Caleb, a robotics starter kit 10 times better than the old secondhand one he'd been using. And when Caleb ran outside, excited, the 4 of them ended up talking in the yard, not as billionaire and construction worker, not as missing heiress and runaway, but as people who had collided through fear and found something like unlikely friendship. The twist came weeks later when Lena convinced her father to partner with Marcus not as employee and billionaire but as co-founder of a youth program designed to help runaway teens, because she said Marcus had saved her spirit and she wanted other kids to experience that same kindness. It took time, long meetings, community skepticism, and more than one emotional moment, but eventually the Bennett Vanderwyk Youth Haven opened its doors, funded by Charles but run with Marcus's vision, a safe space where no child would be turned away into the cold. The grand opening drew national attention, reporters, cameras, and one anchor asked Marcus, "What made you trust a stranger at your door that night?" And Marcus simply replied, "Because someone once helped me when I needed it." Kindness isn't a calculation, it's a responsibility. And as Lena stood beside him, proud and confident, Charles shook his hand, not from a place of power, but from respect. And Caleb tugged Marcus's shirt saying, "Dad, look. We really made something big," and Marcus, looking at the center filled with laughter and safety and hope, realized that one night, one stormy, unexpected knock, had rewritten all their lives, proving that sometimes the greatest fortunes aren't measured in dollars, but in the people we choose to protect, even when they're strangers on our doorstep. Dash dash dash.